You enter a space that feels calm but selective. Everything is clean, quiet, organized. The kind of place where rules are not posted because everyone seems to know them already. The room is arranged with care, clear pathways, defined areas. Nothing blocks your movement, yet you instinctively stay where you are meant to be. Some places feel open, others feel distant, not forbidden, just not for you. People move confidently within their zones. They speak softly. They listen carefully. There's a shared understanding of how things work here. Who speaks, who listens, when to nod, when to stay silent. Questions are not absent. They exist, but they appear in specific forms, carefully phrased, timed well, asked in the right tone. The wrong kind of question would feel out of place, even if no one stopped it. You notice how comfort lives close to agreement. Those who align seem relaxed, settled. Those who hesitate look slightly tense, as if aware of an invisible edge they don't want to cross. The room doesn't threaten, it doesn't warn, it simply organizes attention. Some voices are welcomed, others are quietly redirected. The boundary is not a wall, it's a feeling. Everything here feels reasonable, polite, mature. This is not a place for disruption, it's a place for progress. And progress has conditions. You sense that questioning is allowed, but only up to a point. Enough to show engagement, not enough to slow things down. Doubt is acceptable as long as it resolves quickly. The structure does most of the work. Where you sit, where you stand, how close you are to the center. These details signal what kind of participation is expected. No one explains the boundary. That's important. Explaining would make it visible. Instead, it's learned through observation, through small corrections, through watching what gets attention and what doesn't. The room feels safe because it feels predictable. You know what will be rewarded. You know what will be ignored. You know what will make others uncomfortable. Over time, people adjust. They refine their questions. They soften their doubts. They learn how to sound curious without challenging anything that matters. The boundary doesn't silence anyone directly. It doesn't need to. It shapes behavior before words are spoken. And once you understand where the line is, staying on the right side of it starts to feel like good judgment. This is where Jung would begin to pay attention to what is not said. Not the rules, but the feelings around them. Not the boundary itself, but the quiet relief it creates. The boundary does not only separate space, it separates parts of the self. There is the part that stays inside, and the part that wonders what would happen if it didn't. Jung would notice how quickly people adapt, how fast they learn where to stand, when to speak, how far to go. The boundary becomes internal long before it needs to be enforced. People begin to sense it without looking. The shadow here is curiosity, not loud curiosity, the small kind, the question that forms but dissolves before it reaches the mouth, the thought that feels unnecessary, maybe even inappropriate. When guidance is clear, curiosity can feel like a distraction. When order is visible, questioning feels like friction. Jung understood how the psyche prefers harmony over tension. The boundary offers harmony. Over time, people split themselves gently. The compliant self stays present. It participates. It nods. It belongs. The questioning self moves into the background. It watches quietly. It waits. The shadow grows in that waiting. Not as rebellion, but as silence. Thoughts that don't fit the permitted shape don't disappear. They settle. They become harder to name. Jung would see how the boundary protects people from uncertainty. If you stay inside, you don't have to decide how far is too far. The structure decides for you. that feels safe. But safety has a cost. When questions are shaped by permission, the inner voice grows cautious. People stop trusting their first reaction. They look outward before they look inward. The crowd reinforces this. When many people remain comfortably within the same limits, stepping beyond them feels isolating. Not dangerous, just lonely. The shadow learns that belonging matters more than exploration. Jung believed the shadow gains power when ignored. Here, it gains power by becoming invisible. People don't confront it, they simply stop listening. The boundary doesn't create fear, it creates preference. Staying inside feels easier, cleaner, more mature. The shadow becomes associated with immaturity, with disruption, with risk. And slowly, without anyone saying it, people learn which parts of themselves are welcome here, and which parts should remain quiet, waiting, just beyond the line. This is where Nietzsche would notice how the boundary stops being practical and starts feeling good. Not useful. Good. Staying inside the line begins to feel like maturity, like discipline, like respect. You are not just following rules, you are being the right kind of person. The boundary quietly teaches morality, not through punishment, but through tone. Those who stay within it are calm, reasonable, trusted. Those who press against it feel awkward, excessive, unnecessary. Nietzsche would notice how questioning becomes a moral risk, not because it is wrong, but because it disrupts the shared balance. The group values smoothness, flow, progress. A question that slows things down feels selfish. Morality here is not about truth. It is about alignment, about knowing when to speak and when to stop, about sensing what fits. People begin to judge themselves through this lens. They don't ask, "Is this true?" They ask, "Is this appropriate?" Right and wrong are measured by comfort, not conviction. The boundary turns restraint into virtue. Holding back feels wise, silence feels responsible. Doubt is acceptable only if it stays polite and brief. Nietzsche warned about moral systems that reward obedience without calling it obedience. Here, goodness looks like cooperation, like emotional intelligence, like being easy to work with. No one forces agreement. That would be crude. Instead, agreement is rewarded with belonging, with proximity, with warmth. Morality becomes social positioning. The crowd amplifies this. When everyone stays inside the same lines, the lines feel justified. Shared behavior becomes shared ethics. Consensus replaces evaluation. Nietzsche would see how this creates certainty without depth. People feel correct without ever deciding what correctness means. Values arrive ready-made, embedded in behavior. Difference doesn't disappear. It becomes suspicious. Why would you step outside when everything works so well inside? Why create friction when harmony is available? The boundary makes morality feel clean, organized, non-confrontational. That is its strength. There is no drama to resist, no cruelty to oppose. Nietzsche would not deny the comfort of this. He would question its cost. When morality is defined by staying within limits, courage loses its place. So does creation. In this room, morality does not demand belief, it rewards compliance. And once being good feels like staying in line, questioning starts to feel less like integrity and more like trouble. This is where Machiavelli would stop paying attention to the questions themselves and start observing how the room handles them. Not what is asked, but where the question is allowed to exist. Boundaries are not only about control, they are about efficiency, they reduce uncertainty, they simplify management. Machiavelli understood that power prefers order that looks natural rather than force that looks intentional. In this space, power does not say no, it rarely needs to. Instead, it arranges conditions so that some questions arrive easily while others struggle to reach the center. The difference is not content, it is position. Who gets close matters. Proximity becomes authority. Questions asked from inside the boundary feel legitimate before they are even spoken. Questions from farther back feel optional, less urgent, easier to postpone. Machiavelli would notice how responsibility shifts along these lines. If something changes, it looks like a result of the right questions being asked. If nothing changes, it appears reasonable. Perhaps the question was not refined enough, or not asked from the proper place. The system itself remains untouched. Power benefits from this distance. It does not have to reject anyone openly. It simply allows influence to weaken as it moves outward. Control becomes invisible because it feels structural rather than personal. The crowd reinforces this quietly. When many people accept the same arrangement, the boundary stops looking like a decision. It starts looking like reality. People learn where their questions belong by watching what moves forward and what doesn't. Machiavelli would see how access becomes the real resource. Being heard is not guaranteed. It is earned through alignment, tone, timing, and position. Power belongs to those who speak from the right side of the line. Those closest to the center do not need to raise their voices. Their presence carries weight. Their questions shape direction simply by being close enough to matter. What makes this durable is how calm it feels. There is no confrontation, no visible suppression. The boundary does not argue, it organizes. It filters before power ever needs to respond. Machiavelli understood that power is strongest when it does not defend itself, when it does not explain, when it allows structure to do the persuading. In this room, power does not look aggressive, it looks reasonable, it looks fair. Everyone can speak, but not every voice travels the same distance. And once people accept that distance as normal, power no longer needs to protect itself. The boundary does that work quietly, shaping who is allowed to question and how far that question is permitted to go. This is where belief settles into acceptance. Hill would notice how boundaries stop feeling restrictive and start feeling helpful. The line no longer feels like a limit. It feels like guidance. Belief grows when people feel oriented, when they know where to stand. When the system tells them, gently, how to participate correctly. The boundary does that work quietly. It removes uncertainty before it has time to spread. Hill believed belief strengthens when effort feels rewarded. Here, effort is not about thinking harder. It is about positioning. Being close enough, asking in the right way, from the right place. When access feels earned, belief feels justified. The boundary turns patience into virtue. Waiting your turn feels mature. Accepting your position feels responsible. Belief doesn't need urgency when the system promises eventual access. People begin to trust the structure itself. If questions are filtered, there must be a reason. If access is limited, it must protect something important. Belief fills the gap where explanation is missing. Hill would notice how belief becomes collective reassurance. When many people accept the same limits, those limits feel correct. Shared restraint feels wise. Confidence grows not from answers, but from alignment. The boundary also protects belief from collapse. Doubts that could disrupt never reach the center. Questions that remain unresolved stay at the edges. Belief remains stable because uncertainty is contained. This doesn't feel manipulative, it feels organized, clean, thoughtful. Belief thrives when it feels supported by structure rather than forced by argument. The crowd reinforces this rhythm. People watch others wait calmly. They mirror the behavior. Acceptance spreads through imitation. Belief becomes a posture more than a conviction. Hill understood how belief feeds action. Here, belief feeds compliance. Staying within the boundary feels productive. You are participating. You are doing it right. That feeling sustains trust. Over time, belief stops asking who set the boundary. It stops wondering what exists beyond it. The system becomes the reference point. The line becomes normal. Belief also becomes self-correcting. When frustration appears, the answer is ready. You need to move closer. You need to refine how you ask. You need to wait. The promise is never stated directly, but it is felt. If you stay aligned, access will come. If you remain patient, understanding will arrive. Belief survives on that promise. In this room, belief does not demand certainty. It offers order. And once order feels safer than exploration, trusting without knowing feels not only reasonable, but responsible.